Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. I'm currently in Menara Tabung Haji because I want to interview the CEO and MD of the company, talk about not just Tabung Haji, but the way they invest, particularly when it comes to investing in the local capital markets. When we talk about 2020, this has been a year unlike any other. And the estimates are in. World Bank has estimated compressions between -9 to -2. Bank Negara has been targeting numbers about that same period. Second quarter, we've seen compression of -17% growth in this quarter alone. So it's not going to be an easy year to invest. And yet, Bursa Malaysia continues to attract both retail investors and institutional investors alike to be investing into the capital markets right now. So that's why in my conversation with Dato' Nik Ashuddin of Tabung Haji, we're going to ask him how Tabung Haji views investing in Bursa Malaysia and how this will impact their philosophy of investing, not just for this year, but in the years to come. Thank you, Dato' Nik, for taking the time to speak with us. Let's take a step back and recap into what Tabung Haji is all about and how do you guys invest in the capital markets.
Essentially, Tabung Haji is set up to help Malaysian Muslims to perform their fifth religious obligation, which is the Hajj. And it was conceptualized back in 1962. When those days, saving was not something that is popular among Malaysians. So it was set up where, Malaysians can deposit their money with us, and then what we do, we will invest on their behalf while waiting for the money to reach the amount which will allow them to go to Mecca, and while they get their turn to go to Mecca. So because of that, Alhamdulillah, we have managed to convince Muslims that this is the right institution where they can save while going to Mecca. At this moment, we have around 74 billion ringgit in terms of deposits. And we invest in a few asset classes. Of course, equity is one of the asset classes which we invest in. We do have fixed income. We do have properties and, of course, cash for liquidity purposes. So investment is very important. And I think the other underlying condition is it has to be Syariah compliance. Because, even those days, that was where Tabung Haji differentiated itself, because it was then the only institution which invested in ways which comply with Sharia.
Let's talk a little bit about other asset classes outside of equity for the time being. When we talk about fixed income, things became a lot easier with the emergence of sukuk. And of course, when you talk about property and all the other asset classes, it's easy to find Sharia compliant assets. Is the situation now the same as before?
Sharia financing itself has developed over time, and I think you have a lot of different structures out there, and this is important to us because I think one of the characteristic of fixed income is you have to be able to identify where the risks are and whether it's within your risk appetite, and having a range of structure helps Tabung Haji to choose where it wants to place its the money that technically belongs to the depositor, and we have to make sure that it is safe, provides a stable income so that when they want to go to Mecca, everything is available for them.
How much of your assets are invested locally in equities?
Well, we have 8 billion ringgit exposure to the local market, both the one that we invest on the portfolio basis as well as strategic investment such as BIMB Holdings. So it's one of the major components of our portfolio. Our asset allocation at the moment allows us to invest up to 25% of our fund in equity. So it is an asset class which is important. But of course, we also have some exposure abroad just to ensure that we have the natural hedge when it comes to looking at the portfolio as a whole.
What would be Tabung Haji's view on the local exchange and its role as a financial tool for Tabung Haji?
It provides us with the opportunity to invest, and Bursa is one of the exchanges where it is very prominently known for Sharia compliant assets. So that provides us with the opportunity, and you have a wide range of companies where some you invest to get dividends, some you invest for a shorter term to see whether there's a upside in terms of capital gain. So the kind of companies that are listed on Bursa provide a fair range of opportunities for Tabung Haji in terms of investing, and at the same time ensuring that the underlying assets comply with Sharia principles, which is one of the key issues that we consider when we want to invest in any counters.
Do you think that the strategy on utilizing the capital markets to grow your investments in this year, for instance, has to be a little bit different?
The pandemic is something that is unprecedented, and it's not only Malaysia but throughout the world. So I think those institutions like us who are investing on behalf of our 9 million depositors, we need to be very cautious about market condition. And I think this is where we need to take a more considered approach in terms of, in short term as well as long term. Because even when you look at the financial market as a whole, I think we are going through the low yield kind of situation where, even the fixed income, the yield is going down. In Malaysia, we had a number of OPR cuts in a short period of time. So I think generally, people should not expect that you are able to provide return better than what we normally have until the underlying economy improves. So for Tabung Haji, one, we are mindful that the money belongs to the depositors. It's meant for those who wants to go and perform Hajj. So we have to be extra careful in terms of investing. But notwithstanding that, there are pockets of opportunities, and I'm sure if you look at the market, there are certain counters where it's not only the share price remains stable, but some of them it went up significantly. But we have to understand the underlying fundamentals of those companies. So yes, generally we are more cautious in terms of investing, but we are still looking for opportunities, and there are pockets of opportunities where funds like us should be able to get the upside.
What is your philosophy when it comes to investing in the local market, in equities, for next year against this backdrop?
Well, I think number one, we have to look at whether the pandemic will be able to be resolved in next year or not. Of course, one factor is whether vaccine will be available, not only for Malaysian but across the board. So that is a major thing which may shape the overall market condition, because people need to have that confidence to go back to work, to continue with their businesses. So unless that factor is not taken care of, we foresee the situation may be prolonged, and hence, as I mentioned to you earlier, we'll have to be cautious. We have to basically be pragmatic in terms of the kind of return or yield that we expect, not to stretch it too far to get return where you will be exposing yourself to unnecessary risks. So I would say that we will continue to be cautious in the next couple of years until COVID pandemic is dealt with eventually.
Datuk Nick, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss more with Tabung Haji on capital markets and Bursa Malaysia. Don't go anywhere. We are with the CEO of Tabung Haji, currently in Menara Tabung Haji, Datuk Nick. Let's continue our conversation. We understand that Tabung Haji has a lot of materials, a lot of tools like Sukasila and the likes. Let's learn a little bit more about how you view these kind of products and services offered by Bursa Malaysia.
Well, directly, I think Bursa Sukasila helps in terms of structuring the fixed income assets, and we do have significant exposure to Sharia compliant fixed income asset, and most of the structures use the Sukasila as the platform where they come up with the product. So in that sense, it helps a lot in terms of not just institution like Tabung Haji, but the market at large in terms of coming up with Sharia compliant product. And as I mentioned to you, given the evolution of Sharia finance industry in Malaysia, having such a structure is very important because it supports innovation in Islamic product, and that is also important because as the economy becomes more complicated, you have new business models, so sometimes you need to finance yourself in such a way that it meets your financial requirement, and having structures such as Sukasila will help not only the financial industry to grow, but the real economy to grow as well. So that's one part of it. And of course, when we have investment in equity, some of these companies do get financing using fixed income as well. So indirectly, it also helps to grow our investment universe, and I think that is very helpful for Tabung Haji.
Let's talk a little bit about the progression of the Islamic finance in Malaysia with regard to the context of Islamic capital markets. We have had a lot of laws that is interesting to be noted. Before we had the Islamic banking law, now we have the Financial Islamic Services Act. We also have the Takaful law. We also have the Tabung Haji Act. All these laws that are not seen anywhere else, mostly in other Muslim countries. Because of all these laws, two disciplines come into the picture. Number one, the legality, the legal discipline. Some of the disputes are now being tested in courts, and we've seen the results, and we know how good or how poor the law is, which party it protects more or less, those kind of areas. But the one that I want to touch upon is your discipline. You're an accountant. You've seen how Islamic finance has evolved in the country. Do you feel that Malaysia is on track to have very good capital markets when it comes to Sharia compliancy? And of course, in particular, where do you think this will fit in, for instance, Bursa's strategy moving forward?
Well, I think having a clear regulatory framework for various Sharia financial product is very important because it provides the foundation for assets to be created. I think, and that I think will make the market more ready to support innovative businesses. And I'm not surprised in a short period of time where capital market, especially led by Bursa, would be able to finance even innovative companies using Islamic financing models, because these are very important. Because you have to remember, in Malaysian, we have a majority Muslim population. And I think the level of compliance with Sharia, including financial services, is very high. So if we want to move the economy and to make sure that all Malaysians are able to participate in the economy, this is where you need to make sure the legal framework is there to help them, and should be able to deal with emerging kind of business models where you need the non-traditional way of financing, and I think this is going to be pushed further with so many effort spearheaded by the government as well as private sector, and this is where you need facilitation like Bursa or even a legal framework to support the development. And now I'm sure you have heard even regulators are talking about sandboxing, trying to come up with not just regulation, but business models where they can support a lot of new ways of running business. And I think this is a very important factor for Malaysia because we are known for having the right legal framework to support the development of Islamic finance.
I want to talk a little bit more about your view on retail investors investing in Bursa Malaysia. What are your thoughts on the more aggressive investors out there? And what would be some of your, I guess, words of wisdom for these kind of investors?
Well, retail investors are very important component for any market because they provide the liquidity, they provide the excitement, and we cannot deny that capital market to a certain extent is driven by people who are excited to go in and perhaps to get a reasonable return. And I think in the last 10 or 15 years, government had managed to convince a lot of retailers to go and invest in the market through intermediaries such as unit trust. And I think for Bumiputra, you have PNB, who basically has mobilized a lot of saving, and instead of going direct, they went into the market in that manner. However, I think if you look at the recent trend, there are so many Malaysians who are either rejoining the market or learning to join the market. I think the most important part of that is for them to have enough understanding and knowledge about capital market, because when you invest in financial assets, the value can go up or even disappear in a very short period of time. So having the understanding about the fundamentals of investment, how things work, what can possibly go wrong, I think those information will be useful, and we enable them to be able to invest in the more safer manner. So I think this is where initiatives by SC, for example, having a lot of investor education program is very important, because if you are not familiar with the market, you may be too sentiment driven, and that may not be good for you. So I think I suppose what needs to be organized more is to have more investor education programs where people can just join in and understand the fundamental of investment, and especially on what can go wrong, because market goes up and down. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins and somebody must be losing. So I think that knowledge and understanding must be with all the investors who want to participate in the market.
Okay. Do you believe that the local boss right now is exciting? Do you feel that investors such as yourself, and of course the many retail investors out there, are excited about investing in Bursa Malaysia right now?
Well, as I mentioned to you, we have the mandate to invest on behalf of our depositors. So I think as an institution, you normally take a longer perspective of investment. So whether you expect to invest to get dividend, and hence you'll be looking more for companies which have stronger fundamentals, proven track record. Whereas perhaps the retail investor may be having a shorter term in terms of investment horizon. They want to join the crowd who may be sharing about how much they have been making from the stock market. So we may be different in that sense, because we are investing on behalf of 9 million Malaysians, and that is a very heavy responsibilities. So we have to be a bit more cautious, but we do see opportunities. As I mentioned to you, there are spots where share price has gone up, and it's backed by fundamental. I think that's very important for institutions like Tabung Haji, and I think with the regulatory framework that we have in Malaysia and the supervision both by Securities Commission and Bursa, I think it provides a certain level of comfort for investors to be investing safely. But like in any other situation, you need to be cautious yourself. While there are check and balances by Bursa, by SC in terms of market manipulation, and so on, we need to be mindful of the risk in investing in financial market, capital market. But notwithstanding the challenges brought by COVID, I think there are still opportunities for investors to look at the market.
Okay. Final word, final parting words for people who are watching this interview, trying to understand more about Tabung Haji, trying to understand more about Bursa Malaysia. Your closing statements for these viewers right now.
Well, Tabung Haji being the institution that carries the mandate to mobilize deposit from Muslims who aspire to go to Mecca, I think we have to invest responsibly. We have to make sure that the money is invested in assets which not only provide return to our investors, but also to a certain extent within our risk appetite. The market is exciting at the moment, but we have to understand that COVID brings something that has not been faced by the investing community before. So certainly we need to be very mindful of the consequences, short term as well as long term. But I think given the effort by the government, not only in Malaysia but in most countries around the world, we need to move on. We have to be confident of going back to our normal life, continue with our businesses as well as the investment activities. But we have to be more cautious because number one, the pandemic is still something that is ongoing. We hope and we pray that there will be solution to it. And because of that, I think there will be a lot of uncertainties that we need to try to understand better. But it should not stop us from continuing to support the economy and finance businesses which have good potential, who are able to deal with the challenges down there, and with that, I think the country as well as the world would be able to deal with this pandemic in a more positive way.
Fundamentals of these companies. Do you feel that that's something that is overlooked right now? Investors, I mean, they then tend to go with trend rather than fundamentals.
Well, certain business models may not work under certain circumstances. I think when you look at airline businesses, travel businesses, when you cannot move around, certainly what your so-called successful business model may not be working anymore. So, either you move to a different sector or you run your business differently. So those are things where institutional investors will be looking at in a more detailed way, trying to understand whether the pandemic or the consequences of that has changed the landscape. So I think having a clear understanding of what you are investing into is very important. But I think this is where retailers normally they have a shorter time frame in terms of how they want to make investment decisions. So sometimes they may be exposed to unnecessary risk. That's why, as I mentioned earlier, having a deeper understanding about investment, the risk, the potential reward will guide you better if you are a retailer.
Okay, thank you, Datuk Nick, for this very enlightening conversation. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com, look for Notepad over there. You can also watch these kind of interviews on your mobile devices. Just download the Astro Awani app, wherever you get the application. For now, I am signing off for this special edition of Notepad brought to you by Bursa Malaysia.